One fight that I think would be interesting, one fight I think would be awesome to see, is a fight between Terrence Crawford and Timothy Bradley. Now, back in the day, Terrence Crawford and Timothy Bradley, this was like a decade ago, were like sparring partners, and Timothy Bradley for the longest time said that Terrence Crawford would be a world champion one day. The ironic thing is that years later you can argue that Terrence Crawford has surpassed Timothy Bradley in terms of his skill and his ability. But back in the day, they used to have very ferocious sparring sessions together, and there used to be a lot of competition between the two in the gym. Obviously at the time both of them was signed with Top Rank, I believe, and they both used to spar with each other quite a lot, and they've both got a lot of respect for each other as well. So just seeing it from that perspective, I think it would definitely be an interesting fight if they were to fight. Basically what I wanted to do is what I wanted to see was if both of them were to fight each other, what would have actually happened in that particular fight. If they both would have gone off on each other, I think it would have been a very competitive fight, and I think both of them would have been literally putting it on each other. But in terms of who I thought would have won, I think Timothy Bradley was a very, very all-rounded fighter. He can box, he can fight. The problem is he never had the power that a lot of fighters did, and on top of that, he had a short reach, and he was a shorter fighter. Terrence Crawford was way bigger, so in a weird way the fight would have been reminiscent to the Sean Porter fight. Don't get it twisted, Timothy Bradley would have had his moments. He would have hurt him and tagged him a few times, just like Sean Porter did to Terrence Crawford. But I think eventually Terrence Crawford would have figured him out and would have eventually probably hurt him or knocked him down in a similar way that he did to Sean Porter, because I think in a weird way Sean Porter and Timothy Bradley have similar dimensions when it comes to the welterweight division. They're both shorter than the average welterweight, they both got smaller reach, but they're both very tenacious, and they both have won titles and done great things with their career through hard work and tenacity. But the crazy thing is that both of them have actually, how do I put it, they actually they both lack punching power. That's one thing you can't say Terrence Crawford does lack, because he stopped his last 11 of his 12 opponents. So both of them are in a position where if they were to fight each other, I think it would have been very reminiscent to the Sean Porter versus Terrence Crawford fight. But I think Timothy Bradley's better than Sean Porter, don't get it twisted, but in terms of their physical dimension, they're very much quite similar. I think Timothy Bradley's a way better boxer and slicker than Sean Porter is. But I think if they would have fought each other, I think it would have been a very similar type of fight if they both the same fight that Sean Porter had with Terrence Crawford. It will be very similar to that. But I think eventually Terrence Crawford will win via unanimous decision, or he would have stopped him. That's what I honestly believe. So yeah, that's just my opinion if they both would have fought. Obviously they had many sparring sessions together, but I think obviously that was 10 years ago though, and I think Terrence Crawford has probably gotten 10 times better than what he is now, than what he was back then now. So in my opinion, if they both would have fought each other, I think it would have been very interesting to see who would have won that particular exchange, and it would have been the time for us to actually see it would have been then. But obviously this is a fantasy fight. It's old versus new, and obviously the Terrence Crawford we see now is a completely different animal to the fighter that used to fight and spar with Timothy Bradley back then. But if they both would have fought in their prime, I think it would have been interesting, but I think Terrence Crawford would have won. That's just my personal opinion. Tell me who you think would have won between the two. Who would you put your money on? And like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.